In the year 1835, near San Nicolas Island off the coast of California, a Native American woman was accidentally left behind when a rescue ship departed with her entire tribe. For the next 18 years, she survived completely alone on this desolate island in the Pacific Ocean. When hunters finally discovered her in 1853, she was the last living member of her people and the only person left who could speak her language. This is her story. The woman's real name has been lost to history. The Catholic priests who later baptized her called her Juana María, but we don't know what her people called her. She belonged to the Nicoleño tribe, a small group of Native Americans who had lived on San Nicolas Island for thousands of years. Archaeological evidence shows the Nicoleño people first settled on San Nicolas Island over 10,000 years ago, making them one of the oldest continuous populations in California. They developed a unique culture completely adapted to island life. The island sits 61 miles off the coast of California, isolated in the Pacific Ocean. It's a harsh place with strong winds, no trees, and limited fresh water. The Nicoleño people survive by hunting seals and sea otters, fishing, and gathering shellfish along the rocky shores. For generations, they lived peacefully on this remote island. But in the early 1800s, Russian and Alaskan fur hunters arrived. They began slaughtering the sea otters and seals that the Nicoleño depended on for survival. Because of that, conflicts broke out between the hunters and the tribe. By the 1830s, the Nicoleño population had been devastated. Only a handful of people remained on the island. In 1835, a ship called the Peores Nada arrived at San Nicolas Island with orders to evacuate the remaining Nicoleño people. The captain and crew went ashore and gathered the survivors. Around 20 people boarded the ship, bringing whatever possessions they could carry. The weather was getting worse, and the captain was anxious to leave before a storm hit. The crew counted the passengers and prepared to sail. But as the ship pulled away from the island, a woman on board suddenly realized her young brother was not there. She looked around frantically and could not find him. He had been left behind on the island. Without thinking, she jumped over the side of the ship into the rough ocean and began swimming back toward the shore. The crew shouted for her to come back. The captain faced a terrible decision. The storm was approaching and, turning the ship around would put everyone at risk. He made the choice to keep sailing. The woman reached the island and disappeared into the landscape. The ship continued to the mainland without her. The woman climbed onto the beach and searched desperately for her brother. She called out his name. She searched the caves and rocky areas where he might have hidden. She searched for him for several weeks, but never found him. Most historians believe he died shortly before or after the ship's departure, either from illness or an accident. The woman was now completely alone. The entire tribe was gone. Every person she had ever known had left the island. She stood on this barren rock with no way to leave and no idea if anyone would ever return. San Nicolas Island stretches 8 miles long and 3 miles wide, with no natural harbor, making it dangerous for ships to approach. The windswept and treeless landscape offered little shelter, fresh water was scarce, and winter storms made the coast deadly. This woman had just become the only human being on an island 61 miles from the nearest land, with no tools, no supplies from the ship, and no hope of rescue. She would have to survive completely on her own. The woman did not give up. She began to build a life on the island, using only what nature provided. She found a sheltered spot and constructed a home using the bones of dead whales that had washed ashore, stretching sealskins over the whalebone framework to create walls and a roof. For clothing, cormorants became her resource. These large seabirds nested on the cliffs, and she hunted them carefully, removing their feathers and sewing them together, using bone needles and sinew from seals. The resulting dresses and capes were waterproof and kept her warm during the cold, windy nights. For food, she survived on seals, fish, abalone, and mussels, carving seal bones into spear points and fish hooks for hunting. But survival required more than basic tools. One day, an old knife blade washed up on the beach, likely from a shipwreck. With this single piece of metal, she created an entire toolkit. Food preservation became her most important skill. During summer, when seals were abundant, she hunted them and dried the meat in the sun on flat rocks, creating stores that would sustain her through winter when hunting was nearly impossible. She did the same with fish, laying them out to dry until they became hard and preserved. The island offered little plant food, but she gathered what roots and fruits she could find. Wild ducks that nested on the island provided additional meat and more feathers for her clothing. To keep track of the passing days, she found a straight piece of driftwood and carved a small notch into it each night before sleeping. Winter after winter brought freezing winds and violent storms that shook her shelter. During summer months, she worked from sunrise to sunset, hunting, gathering, drying food, and repairing her tools and home. The rhythms of nature became her calendar. When seals hauled themselves onto the beaches to give birth, she knew spring had come. When cormorants returned in massive flocks to nest on the cliffs, summer was beginning. 1 year passed, then 2, then 5, then 10. 18 years went by with no human voice to hear, no conversation to share, no other person to remind her she was still human. For 18 years, no one came back for her. Several ships had sailed near San Nicolas Island during that time, but none stopped to search for survivors. Everyone assumed the Nicoleño people were gone. Then in 1853, a group of sea otter hunters working near the Channel Islands heard rumors about a woman left behind on San Nicolas decades earlier. They decided to investigate. Captain George Nidever led the expedition to the island. His crew searched the beaches and rocky coastline for any signs of human life. After hours of searching, they found footprints in the sand. Then they discovered a path leading to a shelter made of whale bones covered in seal skins. Near the shelter lay baskets woven from grass and tools carved from bone. Someone was living here. Finally, they saw her. A woman emerged from the shelter, wearing a dress made entirely of green cormorant feathers. She looked at the men with surprise and tried speaking to them, but the hunters could not understand a single word. Her language had died with her tribe. No other living person on Earth could speak it. The hunters convinced the woman to leave the island with them. She gathered a few of her belongings, including her feathered dress and some baskets she had made. Before boarding the boat, she looked back at the island one last time. This barren rock had been her entire world for 18 years. The journey to the mainland took several hours. When they arrived at Santa Barbara Mission, the woman was given the Christian name Juana María by the Catholic priests. News of her discovery spread quickly. People were amazed that someone had survived alone for nearly 2 decades. Researchers and linguists desperately tried to communicate with her, hoping to document her language and learn about Nicoleño culture. But there was no one left who could understand her words. The other members of her tribe who had been evacuated in 1835 had all died within months of reaching the mainland, likely from diseases they had no immunity to. Juana María was the last living speaker of the Nicoleño language. Every word she spoke, every story she tried to tell, died with her because no one could understand. Just 7 weeks after her rescue, Juana María fell ill. On October 19, 1853, she died, likely from dysentery or a disease her body had no immunity to after 18 years of isolation. She was baptized on her deathbed and buried in an unmarked grave at the Santa Barbara Mission Cemetery. The exact location was lost to history. With her death, the Nicoleño language disappeared forever. An entire culture, thousands of years old, vanished. The items she brought from the island were placed in a museum, but the 1906 San Francisco earthquake fire destroyed nearly everything. Today, San Nicolas Island is owned by the U.S. Navy and remains largely uninhabited. Archaeological expeditions have found remains of her whalebone house and thousands of Nicoleño artifacts. In 1960, author Scott Odell wrote Island of the Blue Dolphins, a fictionalized version of her story that won the Newbery Medal. But the real story is more powerful. Juana María survived 18 years of complete isolation through intelligence and determination, only to die 7 weeks after rescue, before anyone could truly understand who she was or what she had endured. If this story moved you, subscribe to The Mystery Loop for more true stories history almost forgot. Hit like and comment. Could you survive 18 years alone? Thanks for watching.